Hey, I just finished reading an article from Sean T. Doyle titled Traditionis Custodes, Ecclesiological Difficulties. And I have thoughts. I don't think it's that good of an article. Let me read you the abstract. The motu proprio Traditionis Custodes reordered the law on celebrating the pre-conciliar Roman liturgical rites. This legislative change, seemingly intended to lead to a single and identical prayer, or unique liturgical expression of the Roman rite, relies on an ecclesiological justification concerning the unity and communion of the Church. Analyzing the motu proprio and its elaborations in light of a three-tier ecclesiological model rooted in the documents of the Second Vatican Council, shows that the unity and communion of no church in this model is tied to the existence of a unique liturgical expression. Rather, the legislation's justification relies on a pre-conciliar ecclesiological outlook that posits the existence of churches defined by rites, such as a Church of the Roman Rite. Due to this reliance, the norms have far-reaching negative consequences for the Roman Rite and the wider Church. Legislative actions on liturgical issues within the Latin Church must have a broader ecclesiological context, and the past and present experiences of the other churches in the Catholic Communion show that a vast liturgical diversity already exists in the Church and does so without harm to Catholic unity. In a sense, this is very enlightening because it makes known that the council had this idea that the church is three-tiered rather than two-tiered. A universal church, the intermediate level church, and then what's the middle one? This is the particular level church. Apologies for my lack of remembrance. And in this sense, when Pope Francis wrote this letter that accompanied the motu proprio, he did so in a manner that was not based in the Second Vatican Council. Rather, he used a method of understanding that came before the Council to undermine or to fight against the liturgical form that was pre-conciliar. So it's this sense of two pre-conciliar motives going against one another. Whereas one says it's supposed to follow the council, but doesn't itself follow the council to counter it. I mean, personally, I reflect and I agree with the Pope's motives. I think that the expression of the preconciliar liturgical form does cause division. Simply practicing it seems to present a denial of the council and its liturgical form. But it's very clearly from this article, even though I don't want to admit it, it's very clearly presented that the way Pope Francis wrote the accompanying letter and the way he wrote Traditionis Custodes, he messed up. He shouldn't have wrote it the way he wrote it. He shouldn't have justified his actions the way he justified them, because by doing so, he didn't give much credit to his word. I would like to say one thing for this article for Sean T. Doyle, that his proposed thought experiment of, well, if the traditional liturgical form breaks off and schisms from the actual church, and then generations pass and is reunited with it, it would be its own right within the Roman Church, and then therefore we would have two rights within the Roman Church. I agree with your experiment, but I think it's a disgusting way to think. It's disgusting because if the traditional form has no disagreements to the unity of the church, then its removal should also have no disagreements to the unity of the church. And that sentence right there is probably going to cause a lot of kerfuffle, a lot of disagreements. Because if the church isn't defined by a rite, if the sui juris church isn't defined by a rite, then we could have as many rites as we want in the Roman Church, the Latin Church, or as Pope Francis says, the Roman Rite Church, which is completely disagreeable to if you agree with Sean T. Doyle's understanding of the documents, and I agree with them. And you can't call it the Roman Rite Church because the rite doesn't define the church. There's 4 instances to a rite, and liturgical form is just one of them. But I think that the use of this traditional rite, when I say rite, I mean liturgical form, the use of this traditional liturgical form is causing division with the church. And by banning and removing it, I'm saying we, but I'm meaning Pope Francis, the magisterium, the Pope, he's bringing about a unity and communion and in form. If there was to be a traditional or historical, whatever you want to call it, extraordinary form of the Roman Rite, perhaps the correct way to do it would be to form a new sui juris church and give it itself its own rite to form off of. But then that would be disagreeable to the understanding of how the documents work by saying that in diversity we are unified. So it's difficult to say. I would prefer it not to be this way, but it seems as though we're moving towards almost a schism. If you can't define a church by its rite, how do you define it? I know that he works through in this article for the Jurist, in 2024, the first quarter one, or however it's presented. He works through the universal, particular, and intermediate church, but I don't really understand how we define those churches. Are they just areas run by a bishop, and then the universal is the entire church together under the final leadership of the Pope? And then what does that mean by the intermediate or the particular church? Because if a parish is understood to be a parish based off the rite it celebrates, that can't be true, because some parishes celebrate or can celebrate multiple rites. And then people themselves bishops, priests themselves can celebrate multiple rites. And he writes about how Pope Francis himself celebrated, I believe it was the Zarian, like the Amazonian rite. And so in that sense, it shows that even a person is not tied to a specific rite. But if Pope Francis' argument was wrong in saying that a church is unified by its rite, he wasn't wrong in saying that a rite can be used to cause disunity through the people who are using it. And therefore, if a rite is being used by malevolent actors, but if its correct form does not cause disunity, then its incorrect form does, wouldn't we be able to say that we could just remove the use of that form, remove the use of that liturgical form, and then bring about the total unity? Because if its correct form doesn't cause disunity, but its incorrect form does, then the removal of that form itself won't cause disunity. But if people want to force a schism, force an issue there, then there is disunity. So I can't see why you can say that the form itself doesn't cause disunity. It kind of does. Because the people who are forming that disunity are based in that rite. They don't really... Never mind. Well, if Francis comes about and he bans the entire use of the preconciliar liturgical form, I see no issue. But so many people are going to freak out. But if it brings unity through that cutting off, I think it's good. But in the end, I agree with Sean T. Doyle's article, and that Pope Francis, the way he wrote Traditionis Custodes, he didn't seem to have a true understanding of what the council documents were writing about, and he should have understood better what the church was writing about with the three-tiered form of the church, with the universal, particular, and intermediate level. It also seems he didn't really want to put forth what a rite is with its four parts. So, in the end, even though Pope Francis seems to have been wrong in how he wrote and used his understanding to finalize Traditionis Custodes to abrogate the preconciliar liturgical form in the Roman Rite, his goals of unity are still good. And people using the preconciliar liturgical form to cause disunity are not good. And so, to bring about more unity, to cut this off, is good. I think it's a worthwhile thing. Yeah, well, I probably have a very low-level view of this article, so if anybody else wants to comment on this video and tell me what they think, I'd be very much appreciative. Alright, take care.